for groups, been discussing in their small groups, I'll just list them out and then we'll bounce into them for our conversation today. First one is, how do you think our culture presents singleness? Obviously, we're talking from the Bible. But it's good to think about the other messages that from all sorts of different sources. How does our culture present singleness? So whatever your circumstances, what are the current challenges of the path God has for you? So that was sort of taps into, Sophie, what you were saying in the message about it's easy to think, oh, the grass is greener, but everyone's got their challenges. So what's that for you? We'll talk about that in a minute. And then thirdly, on that, in what ways do you imagine the grass is greener? How can you bring that to God and find peace in Him, which is what it is all about. Should we start big picture in terms of culturally how does it present singleness? I guess one of the ways I was thinking, maybe Sophie you can speak into this, what's the direction of travel? Is it easier or more acceptable or more enjoyable or even seen as beneficial in terms of being single now compared to previous generations or previous decades, or what? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I can't remember when Airplane came out, but there's a scene where like the hostess is like crying because she's like, I'm 27 years old and I'm not married.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, and I think that it's just like that is just like just completely, it wouldn't make any sense now, because most people, if they wanted to get married, you know, they still wouldn't do it until they're, you know, maybe in their 30s or even, you know, even later. You know, so I think that the stigma in terms of being single, like, is definitely culturally gone sort of like it's become a more reasonable thing, but at the same time there is this kind of new sort of wave actually in thought, I think, in terms of people coming back to being wanting to rebuild family structures. So I was saying to Matt before that there's been a kind of there's been a shift towards like, we don't need families, we don't need those community structures, we will have the freedom, the benefits of freedom are more than the benefits of family, and sort of this idea of going out and doing whatever you want. And I think people are starting to come back and rebel against that actually. The direction of travel is actually that people are starting to move towards like what's called like trad wives. You know, people actually saying, you know, actually I do want to stay at home and look after kids, and you know, sort of choosing to live like that. There've been some interesting people talking about that. Tim Stanley, the historian, was just saying recently that he's written a book about tradition and how there's this kind of shift towards people coming back to, like, even like non-Christians coming back to going to church, even though they don't necessarily believe it, because they crave that sort of traditional structure of living and wider community, which I found really interesting. So I think the wave is going back.
Yeah. So you, like 50 years ago or something, like the sort of Western UK cities sort of society, many people would go to church, or that would be the acceptable thing to go to church, and within that you had a community. And then second half of the 20th century, people moving away from that. We don't need you know, a nuclear family or church to define us. We can actually have freedom from that and do our own thing and define it in the way. And now you're saying people are realizing actually we're missing something. People's life can be so chaotic and so much freedom, there's nothing to stand on. And actually having some sense of family, community, connection with people is
and even a routine, like of just doing something like on Sunday, something that's set apart, that's different. And like my friend was saying, you know, that he used to go to mass every Sunday morning, and he used to always see the same faces at the mass, and even though he didn't know them, wasn't friends with them necessarily, it's like there's a comfort to seeing the same people. And you know, we're so transient, we're so metropolitan, especially if you live in a city. You're used to sort of people coming and going, and they're there for work for a few years, and actually I think we underestimate how like disruptive that is for it's just not normal. It's not the normal way that people have lived for thousands of years. So you know, just we're used to seeing the same faces and sort of knowing where we are. And I feel like there's kind of a sense that, well, maybe I'm just, you know, this my guess is that I think there's this feeling in culture that the world's spinning really, really fast, and we're just kind of like a roundabout, we're just kind of, you know, clinging on, and I think people are trying to ground their heels in a bit, just be like, we need a bit of stability, we need that.
I guess it's with the whole hustle culture that was pretty big pre-pandemic, and you work really hard and you graft really hard and you just give your all to achieving your your fulfillment and your well-being, or whatever way you may deem as you thriving, there wasn't time for relationships, and there wasn't time to. So I guess when we say relationships, I think that there's a different question. Is it a non-married, child-based relationship, child-connected relationship? But then we've hit the pandemic, and we suddenly realized, man, we were running at a crazy fast pace.
Yeah.
We need to probably slow down, and I don't know, I guess we'll travel when travel allows us to travel again, or just take things at a much slower pace. Like lots of stuff being championed about 4-day-a-week work, and that sort of thing. And I guess having the time to do stuff, even investing in relationships, is very different now, post 2020, than it used to be pre 2020. And so there's been like a rapid cultural shift, even in the last few months, and now we're beginning to see the outworking of that. And even as restrictions have been lifted, and as people are encouraged to go back to work and stuff, we suddenly become, oh wow, I'm so busy again, and I don't want to go back into that, work really hard and just devote myself to myself and to doing well in life. Now having more space to, I guess, explore relationships.
Let's talk a little bit about the church. Sophie, you were speaking brilliantly, I would like to say, on Sunday, and just from, I guess, from what is true from the Bible, but also from your experience of being single. And let's talk about the church a little bit. Probably in our cultural conversation there, we're probably speaking particularly about younger people. I think have in mind younger people. But one of the things that I guess the Bible teaches, and we sort of believe as Christians, is that church is not just somewhere where we go on Sunday, but it is a community, it is a family. Can you speak about that in terms of your experience? You know, has church been a family to you? What does that look like? What benefits of that? Or maybe there's frustrations, I'm sure there are, as well as of what it could be, that sort of thing. Could you speak to that a little bit?
There's so many things I could say. I feel like I've done every single point along the spectrum of like how that has felt. But like, I think when you've got quite a big church like Emmanuel, it can feel a bit like, when you go on a Sunday, it can feel a bit daunting, and especially if you're single and you haven't got like the safe person that you can just like cling to all the time and just be like that. But what I've found to be really helpful is that you can, if your only interaction with church is going on a Sunday, it's really hard to build community. And so for me, like, I personally found that small groups, going to small group, serving as well, like just like getting into the mix of things, like going on Sunday, it can be so hard to make those connections. So I think for me that was really, really helpful. Like, I think prayer is also like really important. Like for me personally, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe like 7 years, but at the time I'd been at the church for a while. I came to go to uni, and then I was one of the few that kind of stuck around. And so you've got your friends while at your uni, and then they go off, and then you're kind of like, oh well, I just didn't have any friends really. And I remember like praying with my mum about like, God, give me really like good friends. And now it's just almost like I forget that I didn't have friends, because I've got so many friends. I'm so popular. No, but seriously, I've just got so many friends now, and I just feel like that's really was an answer to prayer. And but it's definitely hard, and I think praying into it is good. Also being open and vulnerable. Like, God brought me to a place in my life where I was really, really like anxious, and basically my life got harder and harder and harder, because what I was dealing with at the time was an undiagnosed autism. And so all these problems are getting worse and worse in my life, and God made that happen so that I could actually, it forced me to reach out and ask for help. And the massive change in my life in terms of community was telling people that I was struggling. And I wouldn't have done that unless things had gotten so bad that I'd had to reach out. And then after that, I realised that how much I was just completely self-sufficient and not letting anyone else help me. And so after that, just mutually, being in community with people in a closer way, that is really, I think, one of the things that breaks the wall down on that. And that's why COVID has been good in some ways, because it has caused people to feel their needs a bit more, and maybe reach out a bit more, see the need for friendship.
I think it's partly why we're doing this series now as well. I think it's a timely moment to reassess our relationships, restates the value of relationships, that whether we are single, whether we're married. I mean, we're going to later on in the series talk about marriage, talk about kids, talk about relating to your parents, and all the different directions of relationships. And that also partly comes from the fact that Jesus' church is a family, is made, like God's been quite intentional. And I think we can definitely lose that in an individualistic society. We're all, well, most of us, are instinctively thinking that way, in an individualistic way. But so to be pushed down, I think, I mean, how I want to say this in a positive way rather than negative, because in a church context, it's easy to give the impression that being married is normative. Like that is and the site that I'm in, I think actually 50% of people are single. And so it's not normative. Just as many people are single as are married couples, but it can feel like that. And being married can feel like the Christian thing to do. Like we can throw out the verses, oh, it's good to be single, but what people hear is, but actually, really, let's be honest.
There's a real tension there, because like I remember, like I think, and I feel like this must be the case for most people. You grow up in your like teens, 20s, and you just assume that, like most people, like your parents, you'll grow up and you'll get married, and then you kind of just assume that'll be the case. And some people do and some people don't. But I remember what was really helpful for me is because I went to a small group, and it was primarily comprised of like women. And some men, actually, a couple of men. Basically, everyone in the group was like in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they were pretty much all single. And I remember thinking, oh, I shouldn't take for granted that that's just the normal trajectory. And that, we kind of assume that, oh, that'll just be my story. And then I think, well, actually, these guys are amazing people. They're like incredibly godly people, physically attractive people, or whatever. And it's just like, and that just hasn't been the story for them. And I think that, being aware of that helped me to sort of kind of think, okay, that is also something that might happen. That might be the case, might not. But I think at the same time, I know the preach this week was talking about how Christ was the fulfilled man. He was single, and there are loads of examples of that, and like Paul and everything, and that is true, and that's great. But marriage is incredibly like from seeing it. You can see the godliness of marriage, and when there is a couple that are more than the sum of their parts because they're together and God's brought them together and they're doing things that they could only do together. There is, we're kind of preaching.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's like how to hold that intention between like saying marriage is good and it's a good thing, and the Bible does commend it, like it's commending a good thing. But how can you receive that as, I'm agreeing it's a good thing, but it's also not for me. If in terms of like, if you're saying, but actually, God's path for me is single. Yohaan, you had a question on this as well that you were discussing earlier. Let's go back to Genesis, shall we?
So going back to Genesis, and
I'm gonna have some more chicken.
We did talk about so Joel in his preach talked about you can't see being single as being incomplete. Singleness is complete because Jesus was a single man and he was complete, the most complete, the man,
and fulfilled
was So there was that sense which was great, we can agree with that, and that sounds lovely, and I don't have any problem with that. But then on the other hand, when we read Genesis 1 and 2 and 3, God said that it's not good for a man to be alone, and so he put Adam to sleep, and from his rib created Eve, and then said it was good or very good. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But God did say that in the beginning, that it's not good for a man to be alone, and so he provided him a life partner. So how do you hold those two things in tension together? Jesus being complete and fulfilled and the man, and then Adam being incomplete, not incomplete but lacking something, and so Jesus sent him on Eve.
Well, Christ was a single and fulfilled man, but he is getting married. That's the thing, like he is marrying the church, like so we're looking at seasons, aren't we? Like I mean, so I suppose that the best of both worlds would be to be in your season of singleness, to find that fulfillment in Christ, in God the Father, as Christ did, to find that fulfillment, but if God has it in your plan to marry, and obviously just for anyone who's not necessarily, that doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the church. You know, the Bible tells the story that Jesus ultimately is going to marry the church. So he, although he's not like in a desperate need of like, I'm lonely and I need a bride, like he's fulfilled, but he is going to enter into that marriage. So I suppose it's like no matter what life stage you're in, like finding your fulfillment first in God. That's the point, and that's what I find really helpful to me.
Oh, that was so good, because I think what George said, and it's the things that you don't think of, but you're aware of, and then suddenly you start thinking about it, is all of us will become single one day. I will probably become single one day. Amy, my wife, might become, depends on which of us dies first.
She might leave you.
Wow. That's only to say.
Highly likely.
Wow. But that's the reality. Like, oh man, we should.
I pray that's not the case.
Thank you very much. We should, even as married people, we need to consider our views on singleness, because God forbid when my wife does die, I can't suddenly start walking around thinking I'm incomplete, or that's it, now my life is on pause, or because I may never get married again. It depends on what stage we are when one of us passes. But I guess it's just really important for us for everybody to really understand, like, okay, when that does happen, you know, how am I going to continue to thrive and bear fruit for God, and just live in He is still my savior. He's still all the blessings in the Bible are true for me as a single man, as it was a married man. So I think it's very important for everybody to consider being single. Yeah.
Reminds me of, John Piper's book on marriage is let's get it right, it's called This Momentary Marriage, A Parable of Permanence. And I guess he's drawing out the themes that that marriage is temporary. You know, we're all going to be, even if we do get married, we'll be married temporarily. We're not going to be married in eternity, you know, to our spouse if we're married now. So it's a temporary thing, but also, and I guess it's what you were alluding to earlier, Sophie, what marriage speaks of is a greater reality that is permanent. There's the unity of Christ with his people, the church. And so I think, yes, you know, when you're married, and we'll talk about this more when we do when we get to that week, but holding it in tension in terms of recognizing it is something that's temporary. It's not going to fulfill everything. And that's a very easy thing to say, but let's be honest, we'll get into it when we talk about this more. But it is that's similar to what you're talking about, the grass green. You can think, okay, now I'm married, it's going to be, this is easy, or this is like, you know, and actually learning to be married can be, you know, is a challenge in itself. And but recognizing that it does speak of something incredible beyond what we can even imagine, the grace of God in terms of Jesus being united with his church.
Can I throw something else?
Go for it.
I'm just thinking about this. I'm just thinking about people in the church that are same-sex attracted. Because I think there is this, again, I would call it a lie, really, that the most important thing in life is being sexually fulfilled, which is just like it. Again, historically, it's a really new idea. You know, most marriages through history have been like arranged. A lot of, you know, a lot of that's still going on now. And I think this idea that if I don't have sex, it's just like, it's like hell on earth. And I think, I know that obviously it's difficult, like to not be sexually active, using medical, you know, thing. But there are challenges that come with that. But if you're in a society that's telling you that's the most important thing all the time, like choosing, you know, celibacy, which is, you know, what comes with being single as a Christian, you know, no matter what stage you're in, or whatever orientation you are, sexual orientation, like, I think there's the sense that we can choose to like reject that, and I think that the more, like, that's another grass is greener thing. I think, oh well, if I'm married, I could, you know, this, that, and the other. It's just like, well, number one, you know, you don't know what people's, you know, sex lives are. That you don't know what the issues they have. Number two, you know, it's just like it. I'm sure it's a great thing, but you know, it doesn't need to be everything like our culture tells you it's everything. And so I think also I just want to. I don't know. I just know so many people Christians who are living faithfully for God celibately because they are single, same-sex attracted, and I just think they are like my absolute heroes because they're choosing to follow God and find fulfillment in Him rather than just believe the lie that I have to go out and have sex. Brilliant. And I just think mad props to them if anyone's listening, watching, because you are literally my heroes.
And I think it comes back to the call on the whole church. So are you going to wrap this up? No?
Huh?
Were you going to wrap it up?
No. I was just going to endorse what you were saying, and I think the reality that we experience is that He is a God of comfort, and we must be expectant of God to provide comfort and encouragement and strength when God is not a philosophy or an idea which you read for like a moment of okay, cool, that just helps my thinking process. But no, just believing that. Because I remember when I made the decision pre getting married that I wasn't going to sleep around anymore. In that moment, it was just weird and difficult and lonely. But experiencing God's comfort, I remember like a clear healing moment of it's okay if I'm not having sex. And I think we must seek God and ask God for just the deep awareness of His presence and the deep knowledge of His love, which is very real. And so I don't think what you're saying is just ideas or good thoughts. It's not, you can experience this God who brings comfort. Yeah, absolutely.
He's actually real.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing.
And I think this theme and this message for those of us who are not single, I think it just renews the call again to be intentional about our friendship and about our community. And I think the way it has challenged me is to think afresh about how I am as an individual, but also as our family are building friendship and community with others. Because I think part of that thing that you were talking about there, Sophie, about to be fulfilled, to have a sexual relationship, and you look all the TV programs and the films and everything that's that's the goal, that's the suggested the way, because everything is wrapped up in that, like a romantic relationship, whether you want kids, whether you want a soulmate, whether you want friendship, really that is the place to find it. And that is part of the lie, that all those things get chucked together. And part of that is because the church comes from a different place. It's saying like, no, okay, yes, sex is something that God has made and has put in a context for blessing, but the sense of having real deep friendships with people, a sense of actually being involved in family life and friendship and looking after kids and that sort of thing, that can be something of a single person's experience in the church in a way that it can or doesn't often or very rarely happens outside of the church, because there is that. And I think we as a church have a call to keep remembering that and keep being intentional about that, 100%. Because it's a truth that God has called us to, but that doesn't mean it happens automatically. And I have to reflection from my life, am I doing that? I think you mentioned small groups, and that's one aspect. I've been in small groups in the past year and just thinking there is no other context that I would be in that this group of people would be together. And actually I've been in that small group concept without my wife,
Is that the elder small group that you're
not elder small group. No, this is, and we've got people of different age groups, people of different backgrounds, single people, married people, with their spouse, without their spouse, that sort of thing. We didn't have kids in the group, but you could have done. But that's the thing. But it's just something so wonderful, about the church that actually our culture doesn't understand, because they don't even see that.
No.
And even just going with what you said, like serve, get stuck in. If you've got time on your hand, I'm time poor. I'm relationship. I've got a wife and kids, but I'm time poor. I just don't have time to do stuff. It's just go and find something that you can get your hands stuck in. And the church being on mission is one of the most incredible adventures that you could get called on.
Absolutely.
And there's just loads of things that you can get stuck into, and not just Sunday serving, but even our Care for City stuff, like there's the food banks, all the projects and initiatives we are part of. Alpha, there's just loads.
And kids, if you're single and you're watching this, get involved with kids, like kids work or helping friends with kids, because otherwise you're not going to learn about kids. In the past, people learned because they all lived in the community together with thousands of kids running around. And I didn't understand, I didn't want to have kids until I started actually just saying I was like, I have all this time on my hands. I'm time rich, actually. And I thought, okay, well, I'll use some of this. And my friend Joe Milligan, legend, had just had baby Toby. And I thought, okay.
He's alright, they just
alright,
moved away.
I love him. But he's in a different country. So I was just like, okay, I've got time. I'm not interested in kids, but Jo is my friend, so I was like, I'm going to help her look after this little thing. Actually, like, that exposure to actually the value of a child completely changed my mind about that, which is, and I just think, if I weren't in the church, I just wouldn't, you wouldn't come across that. And then I think about people my age and younger, it's just like, if you don't have a big family, and families are getting smaller, if you don't have a big family, and you're just never going to be around kids, and so they seem alien to you. They seem like a drain on your money and your time, and they make everything sticky, and you're just like, wow, I want that. But like, so
sticky.
They
make it disgusting.
They make everything. They put stick on everything. I've been to your house, but do you know what I mean? It's like, and I think it's so valuable. And now I'm just maybe even talking from a utilitarian perspective. But just get in with the kids.
You came and hung out with me and my son. We went to the park, and you were brilliant with him. You seemed to have more energy for him than I did.
Yeah.
But I think as a dad with two daughters, I'd love it if my daughters spent time with you. I think you're just a fantastic role model. And so I don't think single people should feel like, oh no, I don't need to be a parent to really invest in kids. I think being a part of a church community means you get to be a role model to young kids, and I think you could teach my daughter stuff that me and my wife couldn't teach my daughters.
Definitely.
And I think they may just look at you and be like, "Whoa, she's so cool," and they won't imitate you, which I think is great. And I'd be so grateful if that happens. So I think just one thing to underline what you said, like get involved with families and with kids, and because you can be a really good role model to kids and just inspirational to kids.
Yeah.
What a lovely note to end.
It's lovely.
Shall we all hold hands and say?
Well, we've hardly eaten any food.
We have.
Because I can't multitask.
Sophie, thank you so much for being with us. It was brilliant.
Thank you.
And hopefully you'll join us again for future talks.
I would love that.
We've got other fun topics such as
your
colleagues.
Your colleagues is coming.
Every day I don't say the word correct, but I have an Indian accent. Okay, deal with it. And a bad cold. It's not colleagues, it's colleagues.
Colleagues.
How do you say it?
Colleagues.
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 Sounds like a rapper.
Colleagues.
DJ Colleagues.
What do we have coming up this Sunday?
That one, though.
That one. I'm going to say it, you say it.
Colleagues.
Your colleagues.
The people that you work with.
Yes.
Yeah. Co-workers.
Your co-workers. Why don't you just call your co-workers?
I don't know, you're the comms department.
I am the comms department. Your colleagues.
We had such a smooth ending and now you're derailing it.
I know.
Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us. And thank you to Sophie and Carl for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.